So our business plan here is to provide free psychological support to people affected by the war, and the way that we would offset that cost is to generate revenue through the farm. And the number one thing that we found that we could sell, and that was shelf stable and popular and had a price that would justify the labor, is through the peppers, tomatoes, and stuff like that. This Mexican food ingredients, and we're good at that. But what it allows us to do is provide psychological support to combat veterans, their families, their survivors, often orphans, widows, moms and dads, that kind of stuff. But what we do is based straight off of the U.S. Veterans Administration. I took their manual and had it translated into Ukrainian. We had to make some changes to it because of the cultural differences and the nature of this war. This is an invasion of a homeland. It's completely different from going to Afghanistan or going to Iraq. It's just a whole nother vibe. When a country is invaded, there's no part of that country that is not affected. And so we had to up our game and make it to where we could provide free psychological support to everybody affected by the war. And that includes trainings for therapists, clergy, military especially. Right off the bat, our lectures were always full of military psychologists, commanders often. And, we've been doing this as far as providing training and therapy since early 2015. I've been working with training addiction counselors here in first in Moscow and then over into Ukraine since 2006. And so we've got an experience at it, and we're good at it. We're not building hospitals, we're providing information, and the message that we deliver works. We've got a long track record of success. Probably because of the motivation, we've got a pretty high recovery rate. I'm not going to compare it to the States or any of these other countries that we've taken information from, because the definitions are a little bit different, what it means to be in recovery. But I know that General Petraeus, when he was in Afghanistan, he said 30% of his combat soldiers, not veterans, these are guys in country, he said 30% of them showed signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. And, I use that a lot when I'm talking to Ukrainian military, because, the U.S. is the best trained military on earth. And if they've got 30% of their guys showing signs, the guys and gals, showing signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, can you imagine what it's going to be like for a country that didn't provide any kind of psychological support before going into combat? And, I mentioned that one of the early lectures I did in Nepper, and it was full of camouflage. And one of the commanders stood up and he said, "Mr. Taylor," he said, "we didn't have boots. We didn't have bullets. We didn't have time to be preparing these guys psychologically to go into combat. We need you to clean up the mess." And that's what we've been doing. We've trained thousands of volunteer and military psychologists all across the country. All these little towns that I keep hearing getting bombed, I've been there. I got friends there. I got colleagues there that are providing psychological support. And so, the Mexican food, the peppers and all this other stuff, which is something I really love, that's how we generate the revenue necessary to produce the psychological treatment for free. And, we needed to come back as quick as we could and get we needed to have things established quickly when the violence escalated. I got pulled out for a few months, and then people kept saying, "Please come back, please come back." And so there was never any question. It was just a matter of when it was practical, and it was practical within a few months. And so what we did, we set it up so that we knew that we could generate enough income, enough revenue to fund this center. We've got a 10-bed center here. But we also needed to be able to do the same thing in 5 or 6 other cities across Ukraine. Right now, it's not practical for us to have patients here in our facility right this minute. It's because of staffing issues. And we've had staffing issues for a long time. But it's even less practical to set these places up across Ukraine because there were missiles overhead last night. And so it's a hell of a time to be living in Ukraine. I can't imagine living anywhere else right now because it is awesome here. But it's got issues. The support that we provide, we do cognitive and behavioral therapy. We do prolonged exposure therapy. We're treating addictions. We're treating anxiety disorders that are combat related. We're doing suicide prevention. A lot of different anxiety disorders that are related to the war. We do grief counseling. We work with orphans. We do a lot of education with clergy, with military. And all of this is this is our way of fighting the war. That, we anticipate, because we know how this type problem will progress through the population. If the war ended today, Ukraine's going to be dealing with psychological issues connected to the war for the next 30 years. Another generation, probably 2 generations if you take into consideration multi-generational grief and trauma. I'll explain that later in another video. But what we're doing, because of the way that it impacts the entire population, there's no part of this country that is not affected by this war. When you're invaded, that's what happens, is it affects everybody. One of the big problems here in Ukraine is, everybody left. There was at one time 6 million refugees in just across the border into Poland, Germany, Slovakia, Estonia. It was 6.5 million, something like that. I think 2 million of them were children. Most of them were women because the men weren't allowed to leave, and they're still not allowed to leave. And so if you think about that, the women have gone and the children are gone. When they come back, when they come back, it's going to be a huge cloud, this black cloud in their heads about the war and what's happened to their country, what's happened to their men. Their families have been scattered, that kind of stuff. Their homes many times have been destroyed. No jobs. That's one of the things that we deal with veterans that are coming back. They went into the military hoping to find a career. They spend a couple of years, they come back to their little village, and there's still no jobs in their little village. And they wonder why did I fight? What was the point? The war will end. It will end sooner or later, hopefully sooner. We're set up and continue to build capacity to provide the social safety net, psychological net to support the country when the floodgates open and the people come back. Slava Ukraine.